Okay, we should be recording at this point. Well, welcome to this webinar, Developing a Healthy Congregations Team. Today is Wednesday, January 21st, 2015, and we'll be meeting from now, 7 p.m. until 8:15. We'll probably close about 8 o'clock, but we will have some overtime if people have questions. So I'm Carol McKinley. I'm an affiliated community minister with the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and I'm also privileged to serve on the Pacific Northwest District's Healthy Congregations team. Now I invite you to join me for a cello sliding. These are the words of the Reverend John Millspaugh. There is a core of light that underlies the little darknesses of our days and the challenges that we face in our lives and in the larger world. This bright flame reminds us of the potential of our lives and the lives of our religious communities. This bright flame shines before us throughout the history of our faith and continues to shine in the congregations we call home. As we gather this evening, we remember this core of light, recognize it as sacred within each of us, and at the center of the life we seek to build together. Again, as Lori had mentioned, please use the chat box at time during the presentation to ask your questions, and I will either address them at that time or wait to an appropriate moment. But this evening's webinar will focus on how your congregation can develop its own healthy congregations team. And we're going to be looking at 3 questions this evening. First, what is a healthy congregations team? Second, how can such a team be helpful in your congregation? And how can your congregation develop one? And I'd like to start with a story. Now, not long ago, the minister of a mid-sized congregation talked to me and told me how a smoldering conflict in her congregation was resolved by her church's healthy congregations team, her congregational group. A member of the team was asked to facilitate a meeting between the chair of her congregation's worship committee and the music director. It seemed that communication between the two had gone from bad to worse. The worship chair felt the music director dismissed as unimportant his request to get information about the service music to him by Wednesday of each week, while the music director felt that her system of getting the information out by Thursday had worked just fine. Now, the worship chair, who needed to put together the order of service and, of course, get that to the printer and so on, resented the music director's delays. He felt very anxious about meeting deadlines that he had imposed upon himself and on the other members of the worship team. In addition, he was further irritated when the music director ignored repeated email and phone messages about music about the upcoming service. Now, the music director served in a quarter-time position at the church, and she felt that the worship leader was way too demanding. She explained she had always had the information in by Thursday. And of course, she had many time demands as a private music teacher and the director of a school choir. She resented the worship chair's constant emails and phone messages. They were very irritating and annoying to her. After all, she knew what her role was as the music director at the church, and all those messages seemed to question her competency as a professional musician and as the music director. So the Healthy Congregations team, with the agreement of both the worship chair and also the music director, met with them one afternoon. And the Healthy Congregations team member explained that the purpose was to explore ways to meet the needs of both of these important members of the church worship team and also the needs of the church as well. She began by asking the two to agree to some guidelines. The guidelines included the time limit. They would meet for no longer than 1 hour. And each person there, the music director and the worship leader, were asked to speak directly to each other, not to the Healthy Congregations team member. And they were to explain why their relationship had become more tense. Each was asked to listen carefully without interruption. And then they were asked to repeat back what they had heard from the other person. Each person would say then what he or she wanted from the other, and finally ask for ways in which the two of them could work together for a smoother relationship and more satisfactory outcomes for their worship experience. Well, 40 minutes passed, and issues and resentments had been aired. The two agreed then that each needed to be a little more sensitive to the needs of the other and also the pressures that they felt. The music director agreed to respond to emails and phone calls promptly and at least let the worship leader know that she had received them and let the worship leader know when exactly the service information would be sent. And then the music director would honor that promise. The worship leader acknowledged that the music director had many obligations, and certainly that he could be more flexible on strict guidelines. He also acknowledged that the music director always came through with the information and consistently enhanced worship with wonderful music. Well, as they parted, each expressed thanks to the other for being honest, for sharing openly, and for us to change one's habits that were no doubt more firmly entrenched by the unspoken resentments each had felt. They further agreed to meet with the team member, the Healthy Congregations team member, after 2 months, just to see how the communication and their mutual agreements were working out, sort of a check-in. Now, although the team member, the Healthy Congregations team member, had served as a facilitator, she was not there to suggest or provide a solution to resolve the conflict. Instead, she provided the space for the conversation to take place. The two found their own resolution by speaking directly and honestly to one another. By coming together to look for a solution that worked for both of them, the worship chair and the music director felt open and to better communication between the two of them. They felt they had improved their relationship that would result in a smoother worship planning. Now, in this format, the facilitator had introduced to the worship leader and to the Healthy Congregations team member what a format that I call the peace table format. It's a facilitated conversation format, and it takes place, as I say, within the space of about an hour or less. And it is for coming to agreement, first of all, airing issues, and then coming to agreement. This peace table format I will include in some references that will come to you that Lori will send out. And it's a simple method that works very well in just a one-on-one type of conversation. So now we're going to move to our first question. What is a Healthy Congregations team? And now I'm going to turn off my camera so that you'll just be seeing the slides. What is a Healthy Congregations team? A Healthy Congregations team is a group that recognizes that whenever two people or more get together, conflict is inevitable. Do any of you live in a perfectly harmonious home, free of disagreements about such things as who takes out the garbage or walks the dog even when it's raining? About how the dishwasher is loaded? Well, I know I certainly don't. We each have our ideas of the right way to do things, and of course it's our own way, and they're bound to come into conflict with the ideas of a spouse, a teenage daughter, or the person sitting next to us in church. I often say that if we were to be conflict-free congregations, each congregation would have only one person. Well, of course, we don't, or at least I hope we don't have just one person. So we come together with our covenants. As UU congregations, this is how we develop relations or develop a pattern for our relationships with a covenant. Our covenants express our intent, our promises for how we hope to be together. A covenant is our promise to be together in love. But what happens when that doesn't work out? When those promises we made seem to be forgotten? In my home congregation in Olympia, Washington, our covenant includes words that speak to this possibility and what we will do when things might not work out in a friendly way all the time. In part, the Olympia covenant reads, this is only a section of it, it begins with, because we need not think alike to love alike, we promise to, and then what we actually promise to do within that covenant. Speak and work openly, honestly, and lovingly with our leadership, providing informed, constructive feedback when we believe change is needed. And then it also moves on to the next portion. Because we recognize that conflict is normal, we promise to speak with each other directly and honestly from a position of respect, kindness, and love, recognizing that to do so, there will be times we need to seek counsel from the community. And I will speak just a little bit later about where some of that counsel from the community can come from. Now, our covenant that we have at our church is printed in our order of service. It's also used when we have new member classes. They go through the covenant a lot and very carefully. And when we have a new member welcome service, it is gone through there with the entire congregation. So it is referred to regularly in worship and in classes, just to remind people that it exists. The covenant is not just written on a piece of paper that is in the filing cabinet and never looked at again. This slide is from First Church, Portland, and I realize you can't read it. It's too small, but I wanted you just to look at how they keep their covenant in front of people. They've put it on a bookmark, so these are the two sides of the bookmark, and it's printed there on this attractive format, and then people will see it and hopefully just kind of absorb it by osmosis, by being familiar with their slide. And this is how their members are reminded of the promise that binds them to each other in their faith community. But how can we make our high ideals, our covenants, real in our church lives? And hopefully then take those ideals and those practices out into the world. And that's where a healthy congregations team can be very helpful. Let's look at how such a team can be formed. A healthy congregations team is made up of 4 to 6 members of your church with overlapping terms, and that's so that terms don't expire all at the same time, but they'll have carry through over perhaps a term as usually suggested. A team is comprised of members who are respected within the community, and this is very important. The Healthy Congregations team is not made up of people who just say, I'd like to be a member of the Healthy Congregations team. The Healthy Congregations team is made up of people who are the Committee on Ministry or perhaps the board has suggested, people who are carefully considered to be wonderful possible members of a team, so that are people who are respected and their ideas are respected and they are experienced. The team should be experienced as you use for at least 3 years, if not in your own congregation, coming to your congregation from somewhere else. So it's important they know not only your congregation, but understand Unitarian Universalist history, and especially our polity. And at that point, I would also mention, understand the importance of the covenant and how that binds our members together within this faith. The team also should be skilled in dispute management. But of course, not everyone will be skilled in that at the outset. So they should be willing to receive training. And finally, the team should be known for its ability to listen well, to listen carefully, to actually hear people and maintain confidentiality, because confidentiality is essential in the work that the team does. You can find further guidelines. These are just a few guidelines. You can find more guidelines for forming a healthy congregation team in Robert Latham's book, Moving On from Church Folly Lane, especially in Addendum 6 of his book. It's the the congregation's Committee on Ministry. Now, I disagree with Latham on this point. I think the healthy congregation teams should be like a branch of the Committee on Ministry. I feel that a Committee on Ministry generally has a lot to do just working on a church's vision and mission, the whole idea of the ministry of the congregation, and then how the church can live into that. And it seems to me that asking the Committee on Ministry members to develop trainings and other means of educating the congregation about healthy conflict puts a large responsibility and major time commitment on those members. But a separate healthy congregations team can focus on the specific tasks of helping members understand conflict dynamics and the different Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I was disconnected briefly, so I had to come back on. So if you had a gap there, which I'm assuming you did, that was why. But now, hopefully, I'm back on here, and that won't happen again. But back to this idea of having a separate healthy congregations team. as I was saying, the team can then focus on the specific tasks of helping members understand conflict dynamics and the differences between unhealthy and healthy conflict. At the beginning, when a team is first formed, the work will be more intense and time demanding, in the sense that they will be being asked to inform the congregation exactly what this team does, and then perhaps do some workshops and so on around communication techniques and conflict dynamics. A healthy congregations team can make real Francis David's maxim, "We need not think alike to love alike." Now on to our second question. How can a healthy congregations team be helpful to your congregation? Conflict is a dangerous opportunity. This is a quote from Robert Bolton's book, People Skills: How to Assert Yourself, Listen to Others, and Resolve Conflicts. It's a book that's been around for quite a while, and I have it listed in the resources at the end of our presentation. Here's an illustration. As you look at that, two older members approaching the new people sitting in their pew. You see any dangerous opportunities in this situation? A healthy congregation can help change our understanding of conflict from being dangerous to being a dangerous opportunity. Now, conflict is neither positive nor negative. It simply is. It's what I think it's Bruce Davis, who was a member of our team and still serves on the district team, still serves as a consultant to us, to our team. He has said it's two ideas trying to occupy the same space. So think of it that way. Think of conflict in that way. Two ideas trying to occupy the same space. So it's neither negative nor positive. But what is important is how we deal with the situation. So how do Well, a healthy congregations team can provide healthy conflict trainings for the congregation. I personally see this as the main work of the team. It again presents conflict as understanding of levels of conflict, from being a problem to solve, from being a disagreement as it begins to escalate into higher levels where it becomes a contest where your main interest is self-protection and being, I must say, a little self-righteous. I think I've certainly felt that way at times. And then it can escalate into a crusade where it is righteous and hurtful to others. The ultimate conflict would be where it almost literally is a world war, and in congregations that sometimes end with a faction breaking off and forming a separate congregation or so on. There's no immediate resolution. And this is a wonderful resource, which again, Lori will send you along with the bibliography. It's Levels of Conflict. And this chart that I have is a wonderful resource explaining these different levels that I just mentioned. It's from Speed Lee's book, Moving Your Church Through Conflict. Speed Lee is a wonderful consultant and has done a lot of work with congregations on conflict. So the trainings provide an understanding of these levels of conflict. Other trainings that it can do, the understanding of how triangulation works. We all know that from the old telephone game that kids used to play, where one says something, whispers in the ear to another person, who then whispers to a third, and so on until the story actually becomes changed. They can provide training on the disadvantages of those parking lot conversations. You've left your committee meeting, and perhaps you didn't like something that was decided at that committee meeting. So you go out into the parking lot, and there's your best friend getting into, a member of the committee as well, getting into his car, and you speak to him and say, well, now I didn't like that, and so on. I think the chair really made a mistake there. Well, those kind of parking lot conversations help to divide. They don't help solve any problems. So the dangers of parking lot conversations, the same can be said of email. Email is, I always think of as kind of a blessing and a curse for many reasons, but when troubles develop in a congregation, using email for anything other than sharing information, like when the next meeting is or sharing an agenda, that sort of thing. When you start talking about other people, the dynamics that are going on, difficult situations can arise. And I think we've all had the experience where you receive a group email and you want to reply just to one person, but you end up sending to the whole list on the email. And those kinds of things make email one of the dangerous things that can happen. And team on those trainings can help point out some of those dangers and also how beneficial email can be used. As part of the training, the team can work with the minister. The minister is critically important in the work of a healthy congregations team. The minister can provide sermons around conflict, what healthy conflict is, and healthy communication, and then introduce the healthy congregations team, so on. Or the healthy congregations team may choose to put on a service. Our local one at Olympia has put them on, and they've done little scenarios with some humor to them, and so on. Other trainings are workshops, putting on workshops. What are these levels of conflict? How can we avoid them? How can we actually communicate better or listen better? Another service and training that I think is useful is providing, upon invitation, an observer at a board or a committee meeting. Perhaps a board meeting has been a little rancorous, or a committee meeting has been a little too testy. So a member of the Healthy Congregations team might just sit in on the meeting, take some notes, make some observations on the kind of communication that's going on. And that communication could include raised eyebrows or, all the body language, as well as the words that are being spoken. So those are all part of the training functions that a healthy congregation can do, and it can be very beneficial to a congregation. The team can make the services available to members, and some of those services could be just a one-on-one, as I mentioned. Maybe you're having some difficulty, as we had in the example before, of two members of the worship team, the music director and the worship team leader. And having the team bring people together for these conversations are really helpful. It's very useful to put together a brochure about your Healthy Congregations team once it's formulated, and put in the names and the contact information for members, as well as outlining the services that you'll provide. A Healthy Congregations team can help your congregation speak openly and honestly. These are all skills that are learned. Sometimes we all forget them, but having a team that helps remind our congregations of healthy communication can be very, very useful. As Parker Palmer has written, conflict and power plays do go on in church, but because intimacy is threatened by these realities, we cover them over in hopes of maintaining a facade of peace. Have you sensed at times that a facade of peace was more important than resolving conflict in your congregation? Perhaps you've decided that a Healthy Congregations team, and I know some of you are already working on them. I know Tacoma has already formed one that team can be helpful to your community. Move on to our next question then. How can your congregation develop its team? Again, look at your congregation's covenant. Look carefully at that covenant. What does it say about how you hope to be together? Again, going back to the Olympia covenant, in part, it has those things that speak directly to how, and I'm a member of that congregation, of how we hope to be together. There's that second part of the covenant that speaks directly to that. So we have the covenant, which says what our promises to each other are, what our hopes are. But does it seem that there needs to be a mechanism that can be used when issues are at a stalemate? Perhaps an issue has arisen that has caused conflict, and so we kind of quickly moved into that conflict mode, the unhealthy conflict mode, without going back to the covenant and saying, now wait a minute, we promised to speak with each other directly. In other words, not to the people in the parking lot or on email. And we also promised to speak from a position of respect, kindness, and love. I might just say here that, of course, just thinking to yourself, recognizing to yourself that the person who with whom you might disagree is just as committed to his or her own opinion and as committed to your congregation as you are. So just always keep that in mind, that with that's a respect and kindness toward that person with whom you may disagree on an issue. After all, we want to look at conflict as a positive spur to creativity. The minister and the committee on ministry can discuss the benefits of having a team whose primary purpose is education about conflict dynamics and healthy communication. As I mentioned just a moment ago, the role of the minister is important. And the committee on ministry, I see as the person who is actually the umbrella for the Healthy Congregations team. So there has to be a lot of collaboration between minister and the COM. And once they have decided that, it would be really good to have that, a group whose primary purpose is education about conflict dynamics and healthy communication, then the COM can suggest some names to the Board of Trustees to be kind of, I'd say, ratified or just approved for members of the new Healthy Congregations team. So again, how can your congregation develop one? So the people are named to the team by the Committee on Ministry, and they begin to meet. The team should sit together and talk, and might just say work out a definition or an explanation of the purpose of their team. This is how they're going to present what they're there for to the congregation. Put it together into that purpose into a written document. Some people might create a policy with guidelines on what the team is and how it operates. In other words, you would put in that document the number of members, the length of terms, the standard things for organizing a committee. You would also, in that document, list the services offered to your congregation's members: education, awareness of conflict dynamics, training in healthy communication. Finally, provide some resources for learning more about getting to yes. I put that getting to yes in quotes. A number of years ago, there was a book that was aimed primarily at businesses called Getting to Yes, which has some really good ideas about communication and in getting to what they call in the book a win-win situation. But as I say, it's an older book and probably can be easily found in your public library, Getting to Yes. In addition to saying what services you offer, it's very important to outline what services are not offered. Conflicts with the minister are not dealt with in a Healthy Congregations team. That is the area that, depending upon what that conflict might be, would be handled within the Committee on Ministry, which looks at the total ministry of the congregation. It might be centered in the board. The minister might also wish to call upon the professional advice of a colleague. So the minister are not handled by this lay team of Healthy Congregation members. Another thing to stay away from is any mediation in familial or marital issues, because someone might come to you and say, gosh, I'm having trouble with my husband or with my wife, and perhaps that is not something you should get into within your church family, but you can certainly refer them to others. While you're defining the team's work, it's important to recognize that some situations may require that you refer the people to outside resources. Certainly marital situations might be one of those types of situations. It's also important to develop a plan with your minister to raise awareness of the new team and its services. I said earlier that it's critical that the minister and the team, along with the Committee on Ministry, work together, because we want our members of our congregations to be aware of this new team and how it can help dynamics within the congregation. The team should offer regular presentations, newsletter articles, and other means to inform the congregation. I have, for example, that I will send on to Lori that she can pass on to you, what I consider an excellent article around the benefits of email communication and when it can become a problem. So sharing that with people, you might put that in a newsletter sometime. Or another thing is to make it very real. It's not just congregational. I recall that a member of a team of one congregation wrote a newsletter article about around the holiday season about the kinds of tensions and conflicts that can arise in homes. It can be with family members, with just the pressures and so on of maybe community responsibilities, as well as maybe some family disagreements and so on. And those are all helpful things, these techniques of communication, of letting people work together on solving problems. All of those are useful not only in the church, but also within our homes, even our workplaces. I think there's a greater expectation on people's behavior in churches. For some reason, people think that because we're all in church, everything's going to go really, really smoothly. And of course, most of us know that that does not happen. So at any rate, just raising awareness of that conflict is normal. That's an important message to get across. This is part of our humanity. Those two ideas trying to occupy the same space. And then, of course, the role of the team, that they can also work on things like the parking lot conversations, triangulation, and use of email can be unhealthy. This image is, I rather like this because it shows essentially the old parking lot conversation with these clay figures, one person listening to another and then passing it on to another, and who knows how it comes out at the end. But generally, that kind of dynamic can often result in unhealthy outcomes, and awareness of that is really important. It's important for the team to emphasize that direct, honest, and loving communication are signs of a healthy congregation. It's another cartoon. Naturally, we don't always agree, nor will we always agree all the time. But in as much as you disagree, you can agree completely. Several resources are available for training of healthy congregation team members, and I'd mentioned that earlier. In your community, virtually all communities now have a dispute resolution center. They are nonprofits, they're community-based, and they're a community-based service that offers professional training for groups. Now, dispute resolution centers vary from county to county, and generally they have some sort of authorization or relationship to the county. But the training that we received here in Olympia when our team first formed was excellent. The trainer from the Dispute Resolution Center of Thurston County was actually, she had attended a UU church as a child. She happened to be a Quaker at this time, but she developed a training program specifically for the 4 members of our team and our minister who joined. And that training went for 20 hours. And at the end, we had a lot of really good material. We had opportunities to practice some healthy communication skills. And the trainer presented us with lots of possible situations we might run into in our church setting and resources that we could find to use those. Now, the disadvantage of the Dispute Resolution Center is that it is fee-based. I've forgotten exactly how much the cost was to our Olympia congregation for that purpose, but I believe it was anywhere between $800 and $850 for those hours of training, which of course was really worth it. But not all congregations have that amount of money available for training. Some of you have people within your congregation. Perhaps they've been trained as mediators for the courts, dealing with families. They're counselors. They've been trained in all sorts of communication techniques and practices as counselors. Or they've been trained as active listeners with a program like Appreciative Inquiry. Many people in our congregations have had programs like Appreciative Inquiry, not only in their volunteer lives, but also in their workplaces. I know a number of people here in our home congregation who are quite skilled at conflict management and healthy conversations because they've received training from their workplace. Also, Appreciative Inquiry training is offered in many communities, and individuals could take that. And that's a wonderful way of learning how to listen, to elicit conversation in congregations. So dispute resolution centers, Appreciative Inquiry training offered. And you can go online and find Appreciative Inquiry, and then we'll list communities, and you can find who's doing it in your own community. And then, of course, a very valuable resource, people within the congregation who have been trained as mediators, as counselors, or as active listeners in other ways. In taking a look at the resources page here, I want to specifically highlight the first one. The Pacific Northwest Healthy Congregations team, as I say here, is a great resource for understanding conflict dynamics and promoting healthy outcomes. And you can go to the district website, which I've listed here, and find out more about its services. We have a number of resources that aren't on that website, unfortunately, but any member of the team that you can be in contact with any member of our team. The Reverend Margaret Kipe is one of our co-chairs, along with David Mentz from the Unitarian. They are co-chairs, and they can go to resources and send them. I'm going to put down in the chat list down there my email address. You can also contact me directly because I have most of those resources on file. And certainly some of the ones that I've referred to, I will be sending to Lori as we conclude this evening so that she can send them on to you along with the references here. As you look, I've only put a few references on this list. The sources for understanding conflict dynamics, for understanding healthy congregations, and Appreciative Inquiry, and for listening skills. They're just numerous out there. But these are some of the ones I've liked. I've David Brubaker, who is a congregational consultant, and then of course Robert Latham's book. That book isn't so much on conflict itself, except that portion in Addendum 6 at the end of the book. Gil Rendell on covenants. He's an excellent resource. And I've listed only 2 of Peter Steinke's books on healthy congregations, and a book I found very excellent, Congregational Leadership in Anxious Times. And he talks a lot. Steinke is wonderful at putting forth very clearly and directly on how to work with conflict and create healthy congregations. And finally, that last one, which is on the healthy or appreciative inquiry practice. And as I say, you might even have people in your congregations who are skilled in that. The formerly known as Alban Institute, and certainly Lois and Linda are very familiar with that, have numerous articles and resources on healthy congregations and healthy communication and building healthy relationships, even as Steinke says there, even in anxious times. You'll notice the copyright on that. He wrote that, that book came out right after the financial crisis, so there was a lot of anxiety going around just among people for concerned about their own financial futures or the futures of even within their congregations. So at this point, I'd love to get any questions you might have on a team, and maybe some of the questions you might have about difficulties or great joys that you have found in your own congregation of resolving conflict or sharing ideas. So I would love to hear from you. And of course, you'll have to go down to that chat box to type your question or message. I don't want to sit too silently here, so I'll just go on as I say, the Healthy Congregations team for our district. While you're maybe thinking of some questions, the Healthy Congregations team not only provides a list of resources and services, but they provide a number of services to congregations. If a congregation is already in conflict, a team may come in to help with an assessment of trying to understand and relate to the congregation the source of that conflict and offer some suggestions or advice for next steps. There are teams on the Healthy Congregations team who do specific trainings. We have trainings on Committee on Ministry. We have individuals who do workshops on creating a covenant if you do not have a covenant. So they will do that. And those are all services, consulting services that are provided by the Healthy Congregations team. We have a number of us. I've been on it for about 6 or 7 years. Margaret Kipe has been on for a number of years, and she's known throughout the country as an expert on conflict management and healthy congregations. Oh, good. I'm getting some questions there from Tacoma. I want to know how to work with the cultural aspects of poor communications practices. How does a team work with cultural bad habits that are hard to change? That's a really good question, because bad communication practices are habits that we develop. And we all know that habits are difficult to change. So I think naming them, first of all, it's really important. If your team has started coming together and thinking about how are we going to address poor communication, first of all, name that poor communication and name some examples of it, of how it has been, it could be damaging or certainly unhealthy within your congregation. And then say that it's really important to change our culture, recognizing how difficult that is. It's not easy to change habits. I mean, ask anyone who's tried to quit smoking or whatever. So, but I think, first of all, name it. Going back to that Parker Palmer quote where he said that many people just would like to maintain an even keel, and so they don't mention some of the difficulties. I'm going to go on the camera again. Okay, so I'm back on the camera, but as I say, name the practice. Name how it has been disadvantageous to your congregation, and say, this is something we're going to work on. And it's not going to be solved with one workshop or one sermon, but it's going to be something that we'll be working on maybe for the next 6 months, and we'll be drawing a focus on that. So that's it. Naming and then focusing on it and not letting it slip by. And also, that's why having an observer, say at a board meeting or at a congregational meeting, having an observer there to actually note some of those things, perhaps noting some of those things, a member of your team noting some of those bad communication practices, because then it makes it very real at the end of that meeting, saying, this is what we noticed. You don't have to name individuals, but you can name the practices and name the dynamics. I'm going to have to go up here. Okay. Okay, here's the next question. Is it Aida? Oh, I love that name. So she's from Saltwater in Federal Way. So 2 members have had an understanding. One of them wants to use the healthy congregations and meet with the other, but the second doesn't want to meet because she felt very offended. What do? You can't force anybody to meet, right? Right, and that's very true. When you have a group of people, it relies upon the agreement of both people to come together. So how do you promote healing in those circumstances? That's a really good question. The way to, I guess you'd almost have to meet with the reluctant person individually and talk about why it would be helpful, even if she feels offended. This would be the chance for him or her, whoever it might be, oh, it's a she, if she's very offended, she needs to say that directly to the person. I'm offended, my feelings were hurt. Talk about how she felt that way and encourage her to do it. The other important thing here, and this is where the team can be very, very important. You can say, you don't have to do it alone. I will come and be in the meeting with you. I'm not your advocate, but I will be there to help facilitate this meeting. And if you feel offended by anything that happens in the meeting, feel free to say it. But I think, and to name it at that time. So I think, yes, you do have to have agreement on all parts, but I think it's really helpful if you encourage them to come, because do they want to continue feeling this way, feeling offended, feeling like they haven't received an apology or an explanation? This can help settle, or at least, if not settle, bring greater understanding to both people, both to the person who was the offender in this person's eyes and to the person who was offended. But it's that coming together and talking together that's so critical. So good luck on that. Yes, it is very difficult sometimes to convince somebody, especially being hurt. Another technique that can be offered on a peace table idea is to have that person who feels offended or hurt perhaps bring another person with her as support. And not necessarily someone who will speak, but somebody who can almost literally be a hand holder and be a comfort there. So that would be another possibility. But it's really important that people come together. So the cultural habits and then reluctant people. Any other questions? It is about 5 after 8 at this point, and if we have no more questions, I'd like to close with this reading by Margaret Wheatley. What if we were to be together and listen to each other's comments with a willingness to expose rather than to confirm our own beliefs and opinions? What if we were to willingly listen to one another with the awareness that we each see the world in unique ways, and with the expectation that I could learn something new if I listened for the differences rather than the similarities? What might we see? What might we learn? What might we create together if we become this kind of listener, one who enjoys the differences and welcomes in disturbance? I know we would be delightfully startled by how much difference there is. And then we would be wonderfully comforted by how much closer we became. Because each time we listen well, we move toward each other. So thank you for attending this webinar. I'm going to, down here in the chat, I'm going to put my email address. It will also be on those references that Lori will send to you. And feel free to bring your questions to me, or if you want some additional resources, just let me know what you need, and perhaps I can provide those for you, or can let you know where you can find them. Here's my email address. There, I think I got it correct. All right. There we go. Okay. There we go. Should be on there in a moment. Okay, well, thank you again for attending this webinar, and best wishes to all of you, and we will now close the meeting. Good night now.